This was the game that I thought Milwaukee would win before the series when I picked Boston in 5, which obviously as of right now is very much wrong. But as I told you guys, after Milwaukee stole game 1, I expected this to be a super long series just because of the dynamics of home court advantage. The reason why I liked Milwaukee's chances most in game 3 was because it's typically the game where the underdog has the best opportunity to win. It's your first game at home in a series where you're already familiar with the other team and you've played twice already. 2, you're almost always the more desperate team, even if you did manage to steal a game. Like, Milwaukee's coming from getting absolutely destroyed in game 2. They had a little bit of a fake comeback in the second half, but they were down 65-40 at halftime in game 2. This was their night to come out in front of their home crowd and take a lead in this series, and they did. Now, it was super interesting on a bunch of different levels, and we're going to get into all of it because there was a moment where I thought Milwaukee was going to blow them out. Early in the game, I actually tweeted out I expected Milwaukee to blow them out because Boston was really sloppy in some specific areas that we'll talk about. Then we have this weird stretch to start the fourth quarter where Boston locks in, and like you could just tell they were in a completely different brain space on offense and were executing and getting great shots. And next thing you know, they have a lead. Then you have this weird final possession or second to last possession for Boston where they get back-to-back completely wide open threes to potentially steal this game and take a 2-1 lead when you've played horrible all night long. And then it's amazing move from Giannis to take the lead, get a stop. Giannis defends Jaylen Brown at the rim, and then they go down and Jrue Holiday has that little floater in the lane and it's over. Just like a crazy helter-skelter, up and down type of game on a bunch of different levels. But Milwaukee takes the lead. You know, I said before this series that if Giannis were to beat this Celtics team, I thought it would be an accomplishment on par with what LeBron did in 2007, beating that Detroit Pistons team. And I don't mean, there's differences. LeBron was younger than Giannis at that point. For LeBron, that took his team to the finals. I don't think the Pistons were the best team in the league that year. I actually think this Boston team is the best team in the league. But the similarities were just the huge talent disparity between the two teams. That Detroit team, I think, had 4 All-Stars the previous year, and all those guys were still very much at that level in 2007, versus a team where it was solid role players, but no second star and kind of just one kind of heliocentric superstar that has the opportunity to potentially overcome the much better team. That's kind of the parallel that I was trying to draw there. And what happened is Detroit was the better team, clearly demonstrated it for large portions of the series, but LeBron just reached down and touched a level of basketball that not very many people in the world have ever done, and it was too much for the Pistons. And next thing you know, they were losing in 6 games. And that's the opportunity that Giannis has here. They're not as good as Boston in any facet of the game. Boston's better at generating high-quality half-court shots. You saw that down the stretch of that game. They got wide-open shots almost every possession in that fourth quarter. They executed fantastically well. Then on the defensive end, they were locking in and making everything difficult on Milwaukee. But down the stretch of that game, Giannis was able to create shots when there was nothing versus Boston missing good shots. But again, as I've always talked about, jump shots, there's a expected value, but it's always up in the air. Sometimes they go in, sometimes they don't. Getting to the rim, closer to the rim stuff is more dependable. Giannis's last 2 made field goals in this game were really nice, a little hook shot in the lane against Jaylen Brown, and then that awesome Euro step around Grant Williams for the game winner. Those are, once he made the move, it's like, that's going in. That's a dependable move. Giannis overcame a clear talent disadvantage tonight with his own individual greatness and won a basketball game. And now he has a 2-1 lead against the team that I think is better. But we're going to dip into a bunch of different parts of this game. I wanted to start with that fourth quarter. Let's start with Giannis in particular. And again, it's like, you saw it down the stretch of that game. They when they went to Jrue Holiday in isolation situations, he had a couple shots that he made, but for the most part, it was really difficult for him, and he actually got blocked on a bunch of his pull-up shots. They tried to run some screen and roll action with Jrue and with Giannis on one side of the floor, and they would kind of meander into the lane, but Boston would compress around them, and things weren't really open. And guys like Pat Connaughton, he made one corner 3, but then he missed his last couple out from the perimeter, so they didn't really have anything working for them. But there was one thing that was definitively working for them, and it was Giannis Antetokounmpo. Just imagine, I think it was early fourth quarter on the right block against Grant Williams, the one where Hubie Brown had a freak out about Giannis dropping his shoulder. And we'll talk a little bit later about Giannis and officiating. And again, really quick note for you Bucks fans, not liking the way Giannis is officiated is not the same thing as not liking Giannis. Those are two completely different things. Just 'cause I love LeBron, and I am totally okay with the fact that he does not get a lot of foul calls when he's trying to bully ball people all the time. But we'll get to that in a little bit. On the right wing, it's bump, and then get into the lane for that hook shot over the top. It was defended perfectly by Grant Williams. The only thing he could have done better is maybe flop to try to take a charge, but Giannis just got to that little half hook in the lane that he made. And by the way, as I tweeted out, that little half hook, to me, that's Giannis's go-to move. That's the move that he can have to beat a set half-court defense. Not the fadeaways, not the one-legged step backs, not the three-point shot. It's that. It's the, let me just bump you once and then step into the middle and take that right-handed hook in the middle of the lane. It's unguardable. His release point is way too high. He can get it in any circumstance, and it's a high-percentage shot. He's not quite there yet, but I would imagine that he's capable of getting to the point where that is like a super, super high percentage, efficient go-to move for him, something that he can go to, kind of similar to the way that same shot was for Tim Duncan. But then he had like two spin moves on Jaylen Brown in the lane, one where he got really good separation and got a dunk, and then on the other one, Jaylen did a good job of sliding in front of him, and he went back to that little hook shot and made it. And then on the final possession, same thing. Nothing's open, didn't settle, did a beautiful like rip to the right and then a beautiful quick Euro step to the left and got just clear around Grant Williams, and he's right at the rim and finishing at the rim. That's unbelievable offense down the stretch. Giannis is the biggest rub on him compared to his peers at the top of the league is his ability to create shots in the half court. And is he as good as LeBron at it? No. Is he as good as Kevin Durant at it? No. Is he as good at, Luka and Jokic and some of these guys at the very top of that list? No. But he has turned himself into a player who's very good at it. He's probably in the tier right below those guys. And that's good enough for Giannis. When you're as good at everything else in basketball as Giannis is, if you're as dominant defensively as he is, if you're as incredible in transition as he is, if you're as incredible as an offensive rebounder finishing around the rim, if you're as incredible defensively, both on the perimeter and in help side, and as a leader and physically, and your ability to thrive in fist fight type environments, if you're good at all of that, then you don't have to be the best half-court scorer in the entire league. But if you're very good at it, that's enough. And he is very good at it, and that's enough for him to be the best player in basketball. And that's what he is right now. We have to acknowledge that because he's demonstrating it for us on a playoff stage. You guys know me, I was slow to admit that because I'm always going to be slow. I'd rather be late to the party than disrespect established guys by bumping them to the front before they deserve it. But Giannis deserves it now. He has clearly demonstrated it. This is the second postseason in a row where he has clearly demonstrated that he's better than anybody else in this field. He's doing it. And again, he has to do it 2 more times. There's a lot of basketball left in this series. We're going to talk more about Boston here in just a minute. But I had to start with Giannis. He deserves the shout out, best player in the world, and he's halfway towards stealing a series against a far superior team that was a minus 200 favorite on FanDuel before the series. A couple more quick notes on Milwaukee. I thought Brook Lopez was a monster tonight. Big double-double, was crashing the offensive glass like crazy. And then especially early in the game, he kind of turned into an interesting release valve for Milwaukee in the half court, just throwing the ball to him on the post. Even against someone like Al Horford, who's a great post defender, when you lose Khris Middleton, especially in rescue situations like late clock, don't have time to run in action, you need someone to throw the ball to that can create a play. And that was kind of an interesting wrinkle tonight, the ability to throw the ball down to Brook Lopez on the block. He scored there a couple times, had a big and one there in the third quarter. It's an interesting kind of wrinkle in this series. And then Jrue Holiday was a monster again. That was the big swing factor in game 1. I told you guys he was the second best player on the floor. I'd say probably Jaylen Brown was the second best player on the floor today, but Jrue Holiday was the definitive number 3, and he was definitely better than Tatum tonight. It's a huge swing factor. We'll talk about Tatum in just a minute, but his shot making was huge again, and he had a bunch of big shots down the stretch, had a big fadeaway along the baseline in the fourth quarter, and then he had the shot that kind of iced the game when Tatum fell over and he hit that kind of wild little floater in the lane. So another big one from Jrue Holiday. But I want to talk about Boston a little bit. Their offense was the story of this game in 2 different ways because they were so incredible offensively in that fourth quarter and they were so bad offensively through the first 3 quarters. I told you guys that, after one of the big reasons why it hasn't gone as smoothly for Boston as I predicted before the series, was they go through these extended stretches where their offensive decision-making becomes poor. And this was something that Ime Udoka specifically talked about before Game 2, talking about early in the shot clock, contested threes off the dribble, and threes that don't come off of multiple driving kicks. And in this entire game, Boston allowed themselves to get psyched out. And for the record, this is a credit to Milwaukee's defense. Milwaukee's defense, because it is so good at specific things and weak at other things, it can mess with your head, especially if your natural priorities as a basketball player are to attack that thing that they're specifically good at. You have to rewire yourself to make the right reads in these situations. That's the predicament that Milwaukee puts you in. But almost immediately from the start tonight, I saw the same kind of offensive decision-making from Boston that I saw in Game 1. Driving into rim protectors instead of trying to get the rim protector out of position before attacking or kicking to open shooters. Quick three-point shots in transition, off the dribble and off the catch. Just a lot of them weren't even open. And some of this I got to credit Milwaukee with because, Milwaukee's defense, we've talked about this a lot on this show, and Bucks fans are all like, no, Milwaukee, their defense is actually good. It was just Brook Lopez. No, it wasn't. Their defense was bad. They were literally 20th in the NBA after the All-Star break in defensive rating. You can't blame Brook Lopez for being a bottom third defense in the NBA. They were bad, okay? But, again, as I've said, the way they were bad was they oversold to the paint and they gave up a lot of stuff on the back end. But again, it's not like the scheme was let people shoot. No, they have stuff built into their scheme to rotate to shooters. They just weren't good at it. They didn't do a good enough job when they'd sell out to the paint at spreading back out when the ball was popping around on the perimeter to get to shooters. Tonight, they did a much, much better job of that. Boston only took 33 threes, and I thought they forced a lot of those. So much better job from Milwaukee in this specific game at rotating around to shooters. But again, Boston bought into that or played into that a lot with their own shot selection. In terms of their basketball IQ, they have guys in Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum and Marcus Smart who have shown a lot of growth over the course of the last few years as decision makers, but it's not consistent. They still have stretches where they dip into it. I thought Tatum, part of the reason why he had a rough night tonight was he was taking difficult shots instead of kind of letting the game come to him. And then as he was, when you're 2 for 11, 2 for 12, 2 for 13, you almost feel like it's not your night. So you start really forcing the action. But that to me was what killed him. And, and again, it comes down to the transition element. So we remember in Game 1, Milwaukee has 28 fast break points. And we talked about how Boston's defense in the half court was excellent, but they struggled defending in transition, and a huge part of it was their bad shot selection. Well, Game 2, they tightened all of that up. They only gave up 6 fast break points. Well, tonight they gave up 21 fast break points again, and my guess is that when I look at the data tomorrow, the half-court defense is going to be excellent, and my guess is it's going to be in transition where they got killed again, which is a damn shame because it's like a proven winning formula there for them. That's right there on the table. Take smart shots, play smart offense, you will win because your defense is better than theirs by a lot. So trap them in a half-court game and you're going to win, right? And they did in the fourth quarter. That's the wild part. Down the stretch of that game, that entire fourth quarter, Boston's offensive execution was excellent. Guys were driving and kicking instead of driving into traffic and trying to finish. Guys were passing on the early shot clock shots that weren't as good as other shots. Down the stretch, they were getting fantastic looks. Really, the only possession I had a problem with was Jaylen Brown. So they're up 100-99. They get back-to-back wide-open threes. I think one of them was for Jaylen and one of them was for Al Horford, if I remember correctly, but they were both wide-open shots. Both of them had a chance to ice the game. You miss them both. It happens. They go down, Giannis scores, okay? So now they're up 101-100. But, again, the shot Giannis took was a really difficult, Euro step through the lane. All-time great move from an all-time great player, but you're still getting better shots on the other end, right? Go down and execute. And Jaylen went off script, early possession, kind of got a lane to the basket. Giannis came over to help, and Jaylen obviously saw him because Jaylen didn't go straight up to the rim. He tried to dive into Giannis's body to drive contact, and he ended up throwing the ball right into the bottom of the rim. Turnover, then they go down, and that's when Jrue Holiday makes the shot that puts him up 3, right? But for the most part in that fourth quarter, up until that Jaylen Brown possession, Boston was really smart with their offensive execution. They took the right shots. And when they take the right shots, they're the better offensive team. They don't have the supreme offensive talent of Giannis, but what they do have is 5 guys on the floor at almost any given moment in time. They have 5 guys on the floor that can shoot, dribble, and pass. And when you have those things, that's when you get those awesome possessions where there's multiple driving kicks, and that's when you really get open shots against this Milwaukee defense. When they do that, that's when they're going to have their best chance to win. But I thought that fourth quarter was really telling. There was a moment there where I'm like, oh man, Boston's going to win this series in 5, because this was the game Milwaukee had to win. Boston played like crap for 3 quarters. This is the game you have to win, and Boston almost stole it. That's what tells me right now, judging by what I saw in overall half-court shot quality through 3 games now, Boston gets better shots. They just do. Again, if Giannis is going to score 42 a game with bad shots, like with terrible opportunity and terrible spacing, then Milwaukee's going to win, right? And that's that all-time great type of accomplishment that I was discussing earlier. But Boston's getting better shots. They should win this series. I expect them to win the next 3 games. One last note with Giannis. I talked a lot after Game 1. At first, after Game 1, I was kind of critical of Giannis for his shot selection, but then after I went back and watched the tape, I relented and said that I was wrong, and that in reality, Giannis is slowly starting to wear down the wall of the Boston defense. That's the important detail. Like guys like Al Horford and Grant Williams, they are capable of sliding their feet and taking Giannis's shoulder to the chest and absorbing it for a possession, and then 2 possessions, and then 3 possessions, and then 4 possessions. But around that 13th, 14th, 15th possession, it starts to get kind of exhausting. And then there comes a point where Giannis is staying at the same level of strength that he's always going to be at, and your defenders are just going to start to be a step slower, be a little bit more willing to open up that shoulder rather than hold their ground, right? And that's when things start to go through. I thought today was the first time in this series where you really saw Boston's defense break. So they give up 22 points in that first quarter. They give up 24 points in the second quarter. They give up 34 points in that third quarter. Giannis was a monster in that quarter. I'll have to go back and look at the film. So again, you guys are going to want to follow me on Twitter at @JasonLT. Tomorrow morning, I'll dive into some of the film of this in particular. But in that third quarter, Giannis broke through that wall. Now all of a sudden he's dunking everything. Now all of a sudden he's getting to the free throw line. Now all of a sudden he's starting to plow people over, and they're not getting in his way the way that they were earlier in the series. It's an interesting thing to watch, because, again, that's why I thought this. Again, I told you guys coming into this that I expected Boston to win Game 4. But for those of you guys who watched our last show, you remember I said, but they have a chance to win Game 3 because they had 3 days off. And I thought that would give them a chance to physically recover to the extent where they'd be fresh enough to stay in front of Giannis in this game. And what was kind of bizarre is I thought Boston's defensive intensity to start this game wasn't great, which was a whole other issue. But again, Giannis has demonstrated that he can wear down this Boston defense over time, which is significant because you play again in 2 days, and I expect Boston to win, like I said. But Giannis's example, Giannis's opportunity is to keep dropping that shoulder, to keep trying to run people over, to keep breaking down that wall, to have more of those 34-point quarters. That's how you're going to have to steal one of these games down the line, because I do think Boston's going to get one in Milwaukee at some point, so you're going to probably have to get another one in Boston, right? So that's Giannis's opportunity. Keep breaking down the wall, keep wearing people down. So my prediction before the series was Boston in 5. I thought they'd win their 2 home games. I thought they'd lose Game 3. I thought they'd win Game 4. And then I thought they'd win Game 5. Well, Milwaukee has derailed that by stealing Game 1, right? But they won Game 3, which I expected. However, I think the half-court shot quality has demonstrated that Boston's the better team. I expect Boston to win Game 4. I expect them to win Game 5 at home. And then I think they'll win Game 6 in a defensive slugfest back in Milwaukee. But if you're a Bucks fan, Giannis has demonstrated that he is capable of overcoming that with his own individual greatness. The opportunity is there for him. Like I said, he's halfway there. Long way to go. But that's the chance. What's going to win? The best team in basketball or the best player in basketball? We are going to find out over the course of the next week.